Hello team, welcome to another ATPGEO Politics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War Frontline update for the 19th of April 2025, 5-day update. So there's going to be a lot of movement, a lot of, unfortunately, cherry red and pink pins denoting Russian advances along the front line from where the previous mappers had the Russian defensive lines. Remember, this is a synthesis map of all the defensive lines of two mappers, Andrew Perpetua and Suriyak maps. We have, so if we go to Kursk, up in the north, we have very much a closing down of the areas of control of the Ukrainians inside the Russian Kursk region. So just some small areas in these two sectors there, with the Russians, according to Andrew Perpetua, having had their defensive line all the way back here, now pushing to where the blue line is, as you can see it there. So that you've got this advancement as Andrew has it. So the Russians pushing the Ukrainians right to the border, and indeed further to the south here, according to Suriyak maps, a pro-Russian mapper, we have a push of the Ukrainians even further to the south, and likewise up here inside the Ukrainian border, around Zhuravka, as south of the Kursk Oblast, I guess, the national borders there. The Ukrainians being pushed back in their own country by the Russians. So that's what the two mappers in this area signify. Now, no change in the Vovchansk area and no change in the Belgorod area. Bit of chaotic polygon usage here. It looks a bit crazy, but basically there's fighting still over Demidivka and Popovka. I've explained before that there's a road here that goes from Demidivka. You can't really see it very easily, but it's this one that comes out of Demidivka, goes north there. I think it's that one, and then does it go through here? It comes along there, but it could actually be this road as it's no, it might not be. No, that one goes to a dead end there. So it's this one that comes up here. This is being hit by the Ukrainians, and that's the main source of supplies, of troops and equipment to Popovka and Demidivka there, and that is being routinely hammered. We saw a video of the road of death of lots of Russian equipment destroyed, presumably along this road, and the Ukrainians continue to do that. Here we have a claim from a Ukrainian source. The Ukrainians have secured the forest near Demidivka, or Demidivka, depending on how it's transcribed, in Belgorod. The trees now speak Ukrainian. So there you can see the Ukrainians supposedly pushing between Popovka and Demidivka, or Popovka, Demidivka, between that and up into this area around the trees and the river course there. So you have this area where the Ukrainians are pushing into. Now, according to Suriyak maps, a Russian defensive line is further to the south. Andrew Perpetua has a Russian further line. Oh, no, sorry. We might talk about it here. So it's over here. Suriyak maps has a Russian defensive line further to the north. Indeed, let's get myself confused. And and Andrew Perpetua has that pretty much, grey zone. Both of these mappers will have this general area as a grey zone. So they're fighting in Demidivka, as far as I understand, Popovka as well. But no changes to the mappers there, and no change as well either in Vovchansk area, even though, so this is one of the two sectors into Kharkiv that Grayskull here is reporting has seen some Ukrainian advances reportedly east of Vovchansk. So you've got the stuff going on in the center there, and right over here to the east, where there might well be some gains for the Ukrainians. So let's see where we can place that on the map. There we have it. It's just south of there. So it says this whole area there is now under Ukrainian control, as according to Grayskull, but no change to the map there. Of course, doesn't really change Andrew Perpetua's map because that's in the grey zone anyway. Quite often we see movement, one side taking ground, but it can be in the grey zone, so it won't denote denote a change in the Russian defensive lines. So now we come to the area north, the most northernmost part of the northeastern axis. This is north of Kupyansk. So we have Kupyansk to Svatova to Crimea. We can see all of this land that the Ukrainians have ceded to the Russians over time. And north of Kupyansk, we have some activity where the Russians supposedly taking a small amount of land near a place called Malyshivka. That's according to Suriyak maps, and then further up towards the northern border. Both mappers have I think that's probably a bit of a glitch there going on. But with regard to this area, we have Suriyak maps showing some increased control for the Russians there, and that is getting right across the Oskil River and moving, in that case, northwards. So definitely a worry, but not too much change around Dniproenerhiya, which is good news for the Ukrainians, as that was, an area where the Russians were really pushing on. But I don't like them being this side of the river at all up here. That does worry me, to be perfectly honest. Then we heard of some gains for the Ukrainians in my last mapping update around the Pishchane area, pushing the Russians back there. No change there, so that's good news for the Ukrainians. Although looking pretty hairy around the Torske and Terny area. This is north of Terny, where you've got these reservoirs, this water course, and you've got Terny on the eastern side, and then Torske further down to the south. The Russians getting further towards the Oskil River, moving westwards and northwards from Terny as well. So making some gains around there. I read out to you a series of accounts of what's going along right across the front line, as according to Russians themselves, from the Don't Stop War Telegram channel. And it was interesting hearing how hellish it is for the Russians everywhere, even where they're having success. And there was talk about, well, we can have success here if we do this and that, but it's basically really hellish here. So even when the Russians are making those gains, remember, it is really difficult for them. And they were talking about Bilohorivka as well in that, and that was a Russian claim there. So there's a massive difference between Andrew Perpetua's Russian defensive line around here, both in the Suriyak forest area, by the Siversk Donetsk River and where it meanders about and has these oxbow lakes. You've got a Russian defensive line that is many kilometers behind where the defensive line is, as according to Suriyak maps, very pro-Russian mapper that just changes their mapping as according to the Ministry of Defense. So there's a bit of a rejig around here where they don't have so much land around here, but actually compared to Andrew Perpetua, it's vastly different. And we hear from, in that thread I read to you yesterday, there was a claim that the Ukrainians are fighting in the west of Bilohorivka, like the village itself, and we're holed up in and it's basement to basement. This is for a long time, for well over a year, probably 2 years. This has been entirely flattened, Bilohorivka. Like, this is a rubberized, and indeed Google Maps is now showing that itself. So the updated mapping here shows that all of these buildings are now just rubberized. This is a completely flattened place, and it's overlooked on both sides, right? And so this is not a good place to be. And that was what the Russians were themselves saying. So that should indicate that the mapping interpretation by Suriyak maps is incorrect, because the Russians are saying, yeah, we're holed up in here. The Ukrainians control the west of Bilohorivka, as in the town itself, and saying that it was horrific there. And that's not at all what Suriyak maps has. So this interpretation of having the Russians way further to the west, I think, is not correct. And I put much more store in what Andrew Perpetua and his team have on their mapping. So that goes on all the way down the Siversk front line. I mean, look at the differences here. It's just absolutely vast. Someone is talking nonsense here. Possibly both could be wrong. It could be somewhere in the middle. But realistically, one of these mappers is getting things woefully wrong. Now, no changes in 5 days to Chasiv Yar is good news for the Ukrainians. There have been some massive attacks in Chasiv Yar, and Andrew Perpetua, when he popped onto my live stream the other day, said that there's a big attack by the Russians in Chasiv Yar, or at least they were trying to attack, and I think they got their entire column was completely destroyed, as in everything was damaged or destroyed and stopped before it got to the contact line. And this is a problem the Russians are having up and down the front line, and we've talked about this in successive hits and losses videos, is that the Ukrainian drone dominance appears to be really impeding the Russians' attempts to even get to the contact line. So both here, we heard down in Andriivka, much further to the south on the front line, the same thing has happened, like huge losses, not even at the contact line. So here we hear in the Kiev Independent, Russia preparing to push forward towards Kostiantynivka in the Donetsk Oblast. So this is Kostiantynivka. We have a number of places on the way, like Stupotchki is important down this T0504 highway. You've got Mykolaiivka there and a few other places. So the Kiev Independent states that a monitoring group says that the Russians are looking to push toward Kostiantynivka, which has always been one of their intentions, right? We've known this is nothing new. Russian troops are solidifying their presence in the village of Kalynove in Donetsk Oblast as they prepare to advance towards Stara Mykolaiivka and the road to Kostiantynivka, according to Deep State, the mappers there. So that is what they're doing. I wonder where Kalynove is, because I wonder if it's further over here. I don't remember Kalynove being a place on the way unless it's coming from the south. No, so not quite sure where they are talking about there. Anyway, you get the point that they are going to make a bid for Kostiantynivka, but you know that is everything for the Russians is difficult at the moment because of their operations in columns, just going through attacking the Ukrainians in these simple old school columns, and then those columns being absolutely hammered before they even get to the contact line. So yeah, they might grind on and take these places bit by bit, but it comes at a huge cost for the Russians. Now, some bit of 6 of one, half dozen the other, it appears, some odd pins around the Torske region, but it does look like that Russian hold on some of these parts of Torske is tenuous at best. According to Andrew Perpetua, you know, there's a very thin corridor of control as it comes up here. Suriyak maps completely different around here as well. I mean, look at the difference in the mappers around Torske. Let's go and see what some of the sources say. We'll come on to that in a second. So the Ukrainians have counterattacked west of Torske. So this map has a completely different interpretation. The grey zone may be going up that highway there or that road, but realistically, it is a much different interpretation of the Russian control around here, with it much more stunted and going back into Torske. And then taking some land back over, I guess, over here. So you've got this small kind of, looks like I don't know if that's a chalk sort of area or something, rectangle there. And I think that looks like that chalk rectangle there. Okay, so the area that they've claimed, this looks like it's in the grey zone. So it's this area there that they have control of, and indeed that's why we see both mappers having some blue pins around there. So there's some gains for the Ukrainians there, and then we hear that, and again, look at the difference between these mappers' interpretations of what's going on in Torske. They're quite different. It is going to be dynamic, of course. This is going back to the 15th, so this is 4 days ago. Ukrainian forces are advancing again in western Torske. The battle is pure hell, street by street, trench by trench. Torske shifts like a dying beast, but the ones pushing it back are alive, relentless, and ours. Glory to the warriors who refuse to break. Okay, so all quite, heroic kind of language there. But we understand that the Ukrainians are pushing back in this area of Torske. So that's going to be here, exactly what we have. We have a single blue pin around, again, a sort of chalk area there, perhaps. Yeah, so there's a very different interpretation as to what's going on here. On that map, the Russians don't control this area there. But anyway, the Ukrainians still continuing to try to push the Russians back into Torske. That much is for sure. Okay, just before we go on to the rest of the Pokrovsk area, it's worth noting that, and I've reported this over the last 2 days, that the Russians have been attacking in huge waves of materiel, not always the best materiel, like motorcycles, although they do convey their own advantage in a way using motorcycles. They're harder to hit than, say, infantry fighting vehicles. And if you've got 20 vehicles as opposed to 20 people in one vehicle, then it's going to be harder to take out the 20 separate vehicles. They're smaller to spot, so if you've got a reconnaissance drone spotting motorcyclists as opposed to spotting an IFV, is going to be harder. But anyway, according to updated information on April the 17th, so that's 2 days ago, and this is, we heard about this huge attack involving just stupendous numbers of motorcycles. We are then hearing, at least from Max 24, there's an updated set of stats from that attack, that during a massive assault on Pokrovsk direction, the Ukrainians destroyed 24 armoured combat vehicles, 99 motorcycles, 2 units of auto equipment, 229 Russians were eliminated, and 34 were wounded. So that was an update on what we heard yesterday, where I was talking about sort of 90 vehicles taken out. Well, it's actually 99. It's just incredible numbers here. So the Pokrovsk area is seeing some pretty sizable attacks, but they are also resulting in massive Russian losses of both material and personnel. Okay, according to both mappers, some small gains for the Russians, but still grinding on north of Alexandropol, Pantelonivka, around this place called Sukabalka there. So, that suddenly popped out of nowhere, and they took all of this area all of a sudden. So that's definitely a worry, moving up that highway towards Romanivka. I think that's a bit of a glitch going on there. So we'll go along to here, and we can see that there are some more gains. Not huge, but that's north of, I don't know, that's anywhere that we've seen for a long time. It's part of this move towards the T0504 highway around this junction here that has seen a bit of, ebb and flow there. The Russians took control of that, and then the Ukrainians took it back. Now it's kind of no man's land. It's around this Vovchansk area. So now they're attacking towards that highway further to the west. Definitely something to worry about for the Ukrainians. Then when we come to this kind of main area around Pokrovsk, actually the Ukrainians doing better than the Russians. There's been talk about, although there's a pin there, talk about success for the Ukrainians in Malyshivka, Dachanska, and around Shevchenko as well. All different claims concerning Shevchenko. But both mappers having the Ukrainians making some gains there, and Suriyak maps having them making gains around Uspanivka. The Ukrainians had got into Salone. That seems to have been a bit of ebb and flow around there. And then there's talk still about Kotlina. There was that Don't Stop War Telegram channel talking about all areas of the front line. There was one comment saying that everything here, I presume it's here, I think it was here they were talking about, is completely flat and burned down. So that, although the Russians have control of that, it's not great there. And in fact, when you listen to the accounts of the Russians, the experiences here, all around here, is pretty dreadful. The FPVs are flying around like mosquitoes on a lake type thing. That they've got really low morale with the Russian troops here. They're just hemmed in, going from wall to wall when they are trying to move, and it's just horrific experiences of the Russian troops, particularly in this Pokrovsk region. Okay, let's go to here, the Euromaidan press reporting from now 2 days ago. We have, let's see if that's the right one. We have Ukrainian forces liberate 16 square kilometers near Pokrovsk, according to a top general. So for months, Russia's been pushing to capture the remaining parts of Donetsk Oblast on eastern Ukraine, with a focus on Pokrovsk, Chasiv Yar, and Ukrainian strongholds. Pokrovsk has been a focal point of Russia's ground assaults. Currently, the Russian incremental gains mostly stalled or have even reversed in these areas, where the Ukrainian troops counterattack and reclaim their previously lost positions. On Sursky's Facebook account himself, says that the Ukrainians have reclaimed an area of Udachne, Kotlina, and Shevchenko settlements, all located near the Ukrainian key logistics hub Kursk. Over the past weeks, he said, we've liberated about 16 square kilometers of territory in the area of Udachne, Kotlina, and Shevchenko settlements. So that is Udachne here, Kotlina, and Shevchenko, which we have noted over time. And it's not just there, of course, further to the east, that's Tachanske, and around Solone as well, further to the south of Udachne. So, there are those claims. I don't know if there's anything else we need to go through there. We do have, that should have been in the Toretsk area. Despite the redeployment of units from Russia's 8th Army in Toretsk, Ukrainian forces continue to advance in the western parts of the city. That was one of the areas we just talked about, but actually it's even further into the city environs, and you can see a completely different interpretation of what the Russians control in Toretsk according to this mapper, and that is from a few days back. But anyway, we'll move on from there. And this is just a claim confirming to some degree, at least, or at least the claim is out there, that the Ukrainians are advancing in Dechenska. So that's this area here. That it looks like, according to, both mappers, the Russians control the western part of that settlement. If you go to this map, though, from the 15th, they don't control the western part of that settlement, that the Ukrainians have taken control of that very short grey zone there. So Grayskull claiming that actually the Ukrainians control all of Dechenska, but we shall see. Right, okay. Then coming out of Pokrovsk, further to the south, we can see that Ukrainians are being pushed back, although there's a little bit of a rejig up there, being pushed back south of the Pokrovsk area, although this might be Andrew Perpetua catching up somewhat with what Suriyak maps had previously claimed. As you can see, there's quite a considerable difference between the mappers here. Really, in some areas, really quite a bit. Several kilometers worth of difference there. And then when we come down to Kostiantynivka, that is, and Andriivka, that is particularly the case. I mean, this is a huge difference, right? So Andrew Perpetua says, mainly grey zone, they're fighting over Kostiantynivka and Andriivka. And Suriyak map says, no, the Russians completely control both of those quite substantial settlements. I don't know how you can have that vast a difference there without one mapper being just very wrong. And I would again put my money on Suriyak maps being very wrong here. Although, they often, Suriyak maps, they, him, whoever it is often prescient, because when they do make these big changes, you think, well, actually, no, it's probably his grey zone. What happens is, and I've told you this a million times, is that the Russians are pushing there, and they continue, and it eventually becomes true. But at the time when, so it could well be that in 2 or 3 weeks' time, the Russians really do control this. And then Suriyak maps goes, I told you so. But actually, no, you didn't. That was wrong at the time, and they didn't control that. But they are continually plugging away at this area, so they eventually will control it. So sometimes Suriyak map gives you an indication of where the Russians will be in a couple of weeks, but it's just not true right now. And this is likely an area where the Russians and the Ukrainians, like Andrew Perpetua indicates, are fighting fiercely. And this is a grey zone full of lots of activity. But anyway, you get the point there. So some realignment of, or some alignment of Andrew Perpetua with Suriyak maps a little further to the south, and then Suriyak maps taking that even further. And that's pretty much all you need to know until we get much further over in Zaporizhia here to see the Ukrainians being pushed back around Novopokrovka. This is kind of north of the Robotna area, northeast. On the way to Malotokmachka. That's according to Suriyak maps again. What else do we have? Oh yeah, the Ukrainians. So this was quite a. I don't know if it's because they've had a really difficult time of it around Velika Novosilka. But there was talk about this small village, Dniproenerhiya, that the Ukrainians took control of back from the Russians. Although Suriyak Maps doesn't show that. Loads of people are talking about that a couple of days ago. This is the 15th, so that's 4 days ago now. Ukrainians have regained control of Dniproenerhiya in the Donetsk region and improved their tactical position in 2 critical directions, according to the Belgorod tactical group. Over 2 months, the group's units have destroyed about 9,500 enemy soldiers, 51 tanks, 166 infantry fighting vehicles, and 819 units of ammo. So that's in that area there. Suriyak Map's not showing that. Andrew Perpetua having that more likely as a grey zone, but many mappers saying that the Ukrainians retook that village there. What else is there to note? Just going to the Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, as summarized in my ATPGEO.com website. Ukrainian sources report that forces in the Lyman directions are primarily using infantry assaults, so that's Torske and Terny, rarely deploying armoured vehicles, and have a significant manpower advantage, sometimes as high as 10 to 1. Russian forces are advancing in a number of places. So that is to say, if we come back out, just to let you know where that is. So that's back over here, the Lyman direction. This is the area where that source is saying that Russians are mainly using infantry to generate their gains there, and not much mechanized equipment is used. The Ukrainian brigade in the Chasiv direction reported repelling a Russian mechanized assault, which included 18 motorcycles. Of course, we'd like to see what they say now about that massive attack in Pokrovsk, where they were claiming 150 motorcycles, of which 99 of them were destroyed. Ukrainian sources indicate Russian forces in the Pokrovsk direction are using motorcycles, that's what we're talking about, buggies, electric scooters, and even Soviet-era T-55 tanks and civilian cars to transport personnel to the front, likely to minimize losses from drone strikes and address shortages of armored vehicles. And that's really one of the key observations there from this set of observations in the Institute for the Study of War. Anyway, that's enough from me. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a summary of what's going on the front line, bit of a mixed bag. But the Russians, although they are making these gains in some areas, it is coming at a huge cost to them. Really is, particularly in this eastern area, around Pokrovsk, Chasiv, and probably further to the south as well, even where they are making more substantial gains. It always comes at a massive cost to them. Anyway, thanks for watching, and please remember that we are raising money for Car for Ukraine, Easter Pysanki. If you go to atpgeo.com/donate, you can see we're only 1,000 behind Silicon Curtain. We've only just really started doing this last couple of days. Please go to that link. You'll go to my campaign fundraising page there, and if you can help the cause, it will be greatly appreciated. Really will be. Thanks so much. Take care. Speak soon.